Hi, welcome to the Sagebrush Happy Hour Journal entry for April 17th, 2025. I was originally thinking to try to get some yard work done today, and unfortunately, the wind has been just horrible all day long. We've been above 30 miles an hour wind gust, and right now it's gusting out there around 50 miles per hour right now. So not a good day to work outside. So came inside and I was thinking about podcasting and doing a astronomy podcast that I'm going to be calling Deep Sage 9, and started doing a little bit of research, and it's funny because nowadays everybody has a podcast, and I'm actually kind of one of the OGs as far as podcasting goes. I was working for a company called Clever Media back in 2005, and we were a casual games company, and we kind of evolved toward podcasting when that first kind of came out, and we were kind of pioneers in video podcasting, and we had a podcast called Podcast Salad, which was a podcast about podcasting, and it was kind of based on the idea. There used to be a cable program called Talk Soup, and it was basically about it was reviewed all the talk shows for the week, and so we had a program called the podcast called Podcast Salad, and we basically reviewed all the other podcasts that were out there on a weekly basis. And some of the things like there was the Ninja podcast, and Podcast Ninja, and some of those original podcasts. So anyway, I haven't done podcasting per se for probably 15 years, and so I kind of was going to dip my toe back in it, and so I looked at whether or not I would do a video podcast or whether I wanted to do an audio podcast and how I would do that. And it's funny because I was thinking back. Yeah, I actually had one of the on Apple Podcast. I had a podcast about Photoshop that was one of the the first page top podcasts for Apple back in the day. And so I'm going to stick my toe back in that, and I realized I didn't have a whole bunch of knowledge about how things work now. And actually, I went in, and as far as audio podcasts, nothing much has changed. You just make an MP3 file with an RSS a feed to it, and you can do that through some of these hosting services, or you can host it yourself. And then as far as video podcasting goes, you can do things like host it on YouTube or something like that, and then provide a RSS feed from the technical side of things. And so from the content side of things is my big dilemma was, or my kind of what I'm been debating today is whether or not to make the podcast kind of hyper local. And so I was inspired to do the podcast because of talking on the radio show about dark skies around the Taos area. And so I thought, my first thought was to make a hyper local podcast where I would talk about the things, issues in astronomy and space and that sort of thing around the Taos area. And I'd have the weather forecast and basically any events that were happening around the area for the astronomy club, or like we've got a telescope going in at the university, and star parties and that sort of thing. And then I was thinking, well, maybe I should do something that's not local and more wider audience. And kind of at the end of the day, I've kind of decided that maybe I'm going to start with the local focus, and then we'll see how that expands out. And because there's, several other astronomy podcasts out there with really, respected people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and that sort of thing. And so I wouldn't really want to be competing with them. That's not the kind of audience that I'm competing for. And so I think we'll go for kind of a local focus first, and because I would be probably the only astronomy podcast for the San Luis Valley area. And so that's kind of the focus that I'm going to go for. So today was kind of mostly about research, listening to other podcasts, seeing what they did, and kind of coming up with an outline that would make sense for doing my podcast. So maybe tomorrow I'll actually try to get this thing off the ground. So that's what's happening here on the Mesa today. And so, and technically, this here is a podcast right here. All right. Cheers, everybody.